Good morning. Today is the rest of section 136. It's verses 36 through 42. Let's just get into it. Verses 36 through 38 talks about which foundation he, Joseph Smith, did lay and was faithful. And it gives a quote by George Albert Smith, which is like a page and a half long. So I'm not going to read it, but it just goes through what he did, what foundation he laid, and why it was important. And I think that's what we've been talking about this whole year. So I'm not going to read it. But in verse 39, it says, "It was needful that he should seal his testimony with his blood." And Orson F. Whitney says this: "Deep down, fundamentally, what was it that brought about the death of the Apostle Paul and the death of the prophet Joseph? The fundamental reason was this: they were servants of God, and Satan wanted them out of the way. They stood as lions in the path and were building up God's kingdom in his own appointed way. Both these men had looked upon the face of deity. Paul had been caught up to the third heaven, Joseph to the seventh heaven, and there heard things unlawful to be uttered. Each was a divinely commissioned preacher of the gospel and the opening of a new dispensation." If you're interested about this third and seventh heaven, the third heaven comes from 2 Corinthians 12, 2 through 5, and seventh heaven, D&C 76, 115. And then verse 39, that he might be honored and the wicked might be condemned. Wilford Woodruff says, "The Lord has suffered some of our prophets and apostles to be martyred, and for what? That the cup of the iniquity of the nations might be full, and that his servants might be crowned heirs of God and joint heirs with Jesus Christ to a martyr's crown." And then verse 40, "Have I not delivered you from your enemies?" George Q. Cannon, "The blood of innocents has stained the soil of free America, the blood of a prophet, of a patriarch, and of other righteous men and women who have suffered for their religion. They were cruelly murdered, and we as a people were driven out by violence, driven out from the midst of civilization, driven out from our homes and our hard-earned possessions, and our track is marked with the blood and with the graves of our own people from the borders of civilization till we reach these Rocky Mountains, and for no other cause for which we could be punished legally. But prejudice was created, men became excited, mobs were formed, and extermination was decided upon, and there was no alternative present to us but this: either to submit to be killed off, men, women, and children, from the face of the earth, or to take our flight, as best we could, in our poverty, to some remote land where we could worship God according to the dictates of our own conscience, in peace, in quietness. We choose the latter alternative. We preferred to come out among tribes of Indians of which we knew nothing, and live in their midst and trust to their mercies, savages though they were, then to remain among civilized men, men who called themselves Christians." And that's one thing that I've always found not fascinating, but kind of contradictory to the United States, is that we had to actually leave the United States to get religious freedom, which is what America was founded on. But I mean, Satan's gonna do what he's gonna do. All right, and then verse 42, "Be faithful, be humble, do not neglect any duty that devolves upon you. Whenever you neglect your prayers, you are on dangerous ground. Whenever you neglect to worship the Lord and break the Sabbath day, you are on dangerous ground. Whenever you neglect to deal righteously and honestly by any person in the world, you are on dangerous ground and in danger of falling into the grasp of Satan. You cannot afford to do it. Satan has great power in the world, and he is more anxious about this little body of people gathered in these mountains than about any nation on this earth. Why? Because these people have the priesthood of God, they have the ordinances of the gospel, they have the power of God for salvation to the world. Hence he is agitated, and he agitates others to stir them up with prejudice and evil thoughts against the Latter-day Saints. The Lord has chosen spirits that have been sent here for the very work that has to be accomplished. Let us develop the fact in our lives that we are among those that the Lord has selected to come here and perform his work. And that's Francis Lyman. Okay. That is section 36. And so I watched the podcast for next week, which is section 37 and 38, which were added to the Doctrine and Covenants in the 70s. So that's why they're not on the wheel, and that's why they're not in the Ludlow. What am I going to do? Okay. We'll figure out something. All right, I love you. That was section 136, verses 36 through 42, and I will talk to you later.